Welcome back to this week's episode of Alexified, the Place for Fashion podcast. This is your host, Lexi Silverstein. I have the pleasure today of talking to Emily Long and Tessa Beltrano from the Remake community, which is a community of fashion lovers, women rights advocates, and environmentalists on a mission to change the industry's harmful practices on people and our planet. Welcome, Emily and Tessa.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having us. Hello.
Yeah, we're so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you. Well, can you tell me a little bit about your global organization and movement and how it kind of got started?
Yeah, so I can start here. I can take it over, Tessa. Remake is a social justice organization. More specifically, we're a community, like you said, of fashion lovers, women rights advocates, and intersectional environmentalists who are on a mission to change the industry's harmful practices on people and our planet. We make sustainability accessible and inclusive across our three pillars: education, advocacy, and transparency. In terms of education, our films, investigative stories, and classroom lectures engage citizens on fashion's impact on people and our planet. Advocacy, we lead campaigns for living wages, gender and climate justice, and long-term systemic change at the policy level, which we're going to get into a lot later. Transparency, we rate fashion brands through our brand directory, which you can find on Remake.world, and work with them to explore how they can better partake in sustainable practices throughout the supply chains. Tessa, do you want to talk a little bit about our origin story?
Yes, I would love to. So thank you for that too. So Remake was founded a little over 5 years ago by Aisha Barenblatt, and she basically saw the need for an organization like Remake after the 2013 Rana Plaza factory collapse. So for some context there, I'm sure a lot of your listeners and viewers know a bit about that, but for those who don't, on April 24th in 2013, Rana Plaza, which is an 8-story commercial building housing a garment factory, it collapsed, and this was the worst industrial disaster to hit the garment industry in Bangladesh, which was a big part of the garment industry at the time and still is. So Aisha Barenblatt, who's Remake's founder again, she was working at Better Work, which is a partnership between the International Labor Organization and World Bank to improve working conditions inside the fashion industry at this time. So she sort of had a window into that world already. And as the death toll mounted, she saw firsthand that these retailers who were inside Rana Plaza were really just worrying about the legal precedent of compensating, the victims' families. And she was moved to want change sooner and faster on behalf of these victims and on behalf of garment workers. So she made the business case for why retailers should invest in the lives of garment workers. And when Rana Plaza fell, it became clear that it would take a groundswell of consumer demand to truly move the needle here. So she thought, what we needed was a people's movement to say no more deaths, no more human rights abuses, no more environmental degradation, just in this quest for cheap clothes, So that was her inspiration for Remake. And she realized in her many years just working alongside advocacy groups that, we've given consumers too few options to engage in the movement up to this point, beyond just boycotts. And, so you hear a lot about what we do and how we kind of tackle this issue from all angles. But I'll say just from my perspective, I see that Remake really builds a bridge between consumers and garment workers so that we can kind of directly connect with and advocate on behalf of these incredible women.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, obviously, one of the things you try to do is educate consumers about the impact of their fashion choices. So please tell me what the real impact of fashion is on our environment. There was a statistic that was released that got a lot of attention saying that the fashion industry was the second biggest polluter behind the oil and gas industry. I think people decided that that was overblown and not quite accurate. Can you give me a picture that illustrates how much the fashion industry is impacting our planet, something that everyday people could kind of relate to more?
Yeah, 100%. So I remember when that came out and how it was kind of like, wait a second, who falls
Yeah,
where?
it was shock all over Instagram,
Right. And I think, what's helpful to drill down to is that in terms of that second most polluting statistic, it's hard to nail down which industry does fall where. Technically in the fashion industry specifically is made up of so many other elements of this complex supply chain. So it involves oil, transportation, agriculture. It's hard to kind of parse out those details. So we understand that.
Yeah, like what we can do is really drill down into specifics to better understand the direct impact. So, like a great fact is approximately 82 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions comes from textile and leather, which is insane. Clothes with non-biodegradable fabric, which is most of the clothing you own, will sit in landfills for up to 200 years, longer if they're plastic, like a polyester or a nylon, things that have stretch, so all of our athletic wear. Each year, 200 million pounds of clothing end up in New York City's landfill site. This is crazy. The equivalent of filling the Statue of Liberty with garments 440 times. Like, what? Like, I can't, it's something you can't even like comprehend, right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Wow.
Each year, 200 million pounds in just New York itself. Like,
That's insane.
yeah.
That gives people a
So,
really good like way of like kind of imagining
brain,
it, but
yeah.
it's like also like I can't even imagine that. Like that's even insane.
Yeah, I mean, the Statue of Liberty is massive and you're filling it 440 times. Like, think about it.
Yeah, that's insane. And I feel like so many people just are not at all aware of that in the slightest.
It's sometimes hard to conceptualize, but when we
Mhm.
get these facts down, it's hopefully brings more ideas to the people that like this is a real thing and it's filling up our landfills and it's harming the environment, and we need to take a second to kind of understand that and how we can help.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk about the ways the fashion industry does pollute and then discuss maybe ways that we can solve it. It starts with the way, as you mentioned, it's the clothes are manufactured, right? So, can we talk about the ways clothes are made and how it impacts our planet, water wasted, chemicals used, the fabrics that are chosen?
Yeah, to give listeners another quick fact about something that's tangible so they can understand, it takes approximately 450 liters of water to make one t-shirt. So that's more than 2 years worth of drinking water for one person. So
Wow.
it's a lot of water. Obviously, that's one way it affects the environment. Just the manufacturing of one T-shirt. In terms of fabrics that we touched on a little bit, plastic based fabrics like polyester, nylon, fabric blends with synthetic materials are the worst types of fabrics. It takes petroleum to make these clothing, obviously, because they're made of plastic.
Mhm.
And the washing is also something that people don't really talk about. When you wash something with synthetics, like your athletic wear or anything with like a spandexy stretch, those microplastics actually go back into our waterways. Which I mean, you obviously you can't see these, but they're there, they exist. One of the best things that I actually use is called a Guppy Friend bag. So just a little touch on something that can help decrease that. I put all my athletic wear into like this kind of like big Ziploc bag. And when you wash your clothes, it helps trap the microplastics. So that's a little bit of a way that we can reduce that. And if your listeners are interested, we can definitely put it in some type of the show notes or something so they can check that out.
Definitely.
Dyeing also impacts the planet in the manufacturing process like you wouldn't believe. And again, something that's not really known unless you're in the industry and you understand like the whole supply chain process. So dyeing is something like dyeing your jeans like an indigo blue. So there's something called dye runoff.
Mm.
So what's interesting with that is that if the hazardous waste in a manufacturing facility isn't monitored in the right way, there can be runoff into the waterways and really polluting the community that is in that area, their waterways, from clean water, drinking water. If this topic interests people who are listening, there's also a great documentary called RiverBlue, which kind of is super informative and gives you a good look inside fabric dyeing in general. And then one of the biggest things when clothes are manufactured, end life is very rarely considered. So if the garments don't get put back into circulation through, say, like thrifting or
Mhm.
things like of that sort, or swapping or giving to someone in need, um, they inevitably go to landfill, of course.
Mhm.
So another crazy fact: in 1 year, 1,245,000 tons of clothing were purchased in the UK. That's 38 pounds of clothing per individual.
Mhm.
So another crazy thing. Like end
Yeah.
life just really, what's great about what's going on in the industry is that it's becoming more relevant, but it's something that I guess that I think consumers really need to hear is you don't, when you buy something, it just doesn't disappear. You know, there's something that happens to it once um you
Once you're
buy
done
it and you
with it.
wear it. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. So, what does the industry really need to be doing about this fabric dyeing and fabrics and how we kind of use or what do we need to change? What does the industry need to change in order to make fabrics better?
Yeah, a lot of things in our opinion. But one of my, personal favorite things to kind of keep in mind within this industry is, in general, just every aspect of it, we need to slow down. Like we need to
Mhm.
slow down and look at where fabrics are ending up, where they're coming from, and just kind of like take a moment to look at the entire supply chain and those impacts. So more specifically, I would say if I was speaking to brands directly, consider the impacts of the fabrics you choose at every step of that supply chain of those materials. Avoid using petroleum-based fabrics whenever possible. So again, Emily touched on that. That was the polyester, the nylon. Choose fabrics and fibers, different methods of construction that are less water intensive, because that can definitely range across fabrics. Ensure that they're ethically sourced. So that's, talking about farmers, textile workers, all the way up, to the point of constructing that garment.
Mhm.
Ensure that, they're paid a living wage and provided with safe working conditions. And then, as Emily touched on before, that end of life as well. So it's not just, or at least it shouldn't just be on the consumers to focus on where that garment ends up at the end of its life. So ideally, brands would be thinking about this right from the start and say, how can this be used again once this end customer is done with it? Can it be upcycled or recycled, or will it just be landfill bound? So these are a lot of questions that I would hope
Mhm.
that brands are asking.
Yeah. And so you mentioned to kind of slow down. And so
Mhm.
I've heard the term, slow fashion a lot, but what most people know is fast fashion. And
Mhm.
fast fashion. So is that like one of the biggest problems when it comes to consumer buying habits? And can you tell our listeners kind of what fast fashion is and when did it start and why is it so bad?
Yeah, I think fast fashion is definitely one of the biggest problems when it comes to like toxic consumer buying habits. Why is that? Because buying fast fashion kind of perpetuates all of these like really negative things like garment worker wage theft, cheaply made clothing, which doesn't last long, which then in turn continues throwaway culture.
Mhm.
If you don't know what throwaway culture is, it's kind of like that. If you saw that Instagram where it's like, oh, I wore it once on my Instagram, like I posted on Instagram, I can't ever wear it again. So
Mhm.
it's that it's perpetuating that, like, I'm going to go to Zara because I'm going to buy that one shirt that I'm going to wear once out and then I'm
Mhm.
never going to wear it again, which obviously accelerates damage to the environment because where does it end up? Most likely landfill.
Mhm.
Um, in particular, some of the worst offenders in fashion right now are Zara, Forever 21, Misguided, Urban Outfitters, Boohoo, and Fashion Nova, just to name six. But the toxic consumer buying habits really stem from this type of culture of buying fast, and having things new on the shelves that every 2 weeks, every
Mhm.
month is still too much. We have to, like Tessa said, really slow down, see what we're buying, and make conscious decisions with the new facts that we're learning along the way. It's always a journey. Like everyone's consumer buying habits are a journey. So making sure that you're trying to learn is really, I think, important in today's consumer habits.
Mhm.
Definitely. And I've definitely noticed that consumer habits have, really been focusing, at least lately, more on it kind of varies. I feel like it depends on the person because I see like I'll scroll through TikTok and they're like, oh, Shein haul, Urban Outfitters haul, whatever. And then I'll like go to I'll see the next thing and it'll be like, here's like what you could be doing instead of like shopping fast fashion. Or so it kind of depends, but I feel like definitely brands are getting a lot of pressure from consumers now more than before,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
follow those sustainable practices and ethical practices and overall just have a clean model. But for anyone who doesn't really know what fast fashion is, it's essentially a model that, you know, it really just sticks with the trends. Easy way of describing it.
Truly.
A trend will come up, they will have that trend will die, and all the clothes will go with it. And it's
Yep.
kind of insane because lately stores can have new clothes like every week, and it's going faster and faster when it really should be. We should
Right.
be focusing on making it slower.
And how do people think this happens? Like, you know, like how
Yeah.
do we get these prices so low? How do we get things made so quickly? There has to be a reason that this is happening, you know? Like it is a sad and depressing topic to talk about, but we need to in order to make sure that we're being responsible for our own decisions and consumer habits that we have ourselves, you know. It's important for the rest of the world and uh, for the people that we don't truly like see, you know what I mean? Who we just
Mhm.
buy something and we're like, oh, this shirt's cute. And you don't see the maker themselves sewing it together, putting the button on, putting the collar on, you know. It's
Yeah.
all hidden.
And a lot of those people who are putting the button on and putting the collar on are in terrible, terrible working conditions, which is kind of what we were touching on. Was you don't really know, like, how is this happening? It's happening because they're in these terrible working conditions and they're not getting paid enough. But we'll touch on that a little later. So
Yeah, we will.
you mentioned that, you know, talking about this is depressing, and talking about the problems it definitely can be depressing. Can you tell me something that is a promising thing that you are seeing in the fashion industry currently happening?
Yeah, luckily there's a lot that's going well, and a lot of good things happening. So one, just from our perspective at Remake, we're really focused on SB 62. So that's Senate Bill 62, otherwise known as the Garment Worker Protection Act.
Mhm.
So that just passed the California Senate. We're very excited about that. We can get into that a little bit more later, but that's one really good piece of news for us. And then Remake's campaign, the Pay Up campaign,
Mhm.
there's been a few wins there that we're really excited about. So just for a little background for those who don't know, Remake's Pay Up campaign came just with the economic slowdown that it was brought on by COVID. Brands and retailers just made this catastrophic decision to cancel $40 billion worth of orders and threatening the already poverty level wages of garment workers around the globe. So from that, this Pay Up campaign was sparked, and the petition received 275,000 signatures, which then was forwarded to all these brand executives and led to unlocking over $40 billion worth of over half of, not quite there yet, but over half of
We're
40
working on it.
billion. Yes, hopefully soon, but over half of the $40 billion stolen from fashion's most vulnerable workers and wages. So we're at $22 billion so far that have been recovered for those garment workers. And then just last aspect on that Pay Up campaign as well. So the new Pay Up Fashion Petition, it sort of evolved from the original Pay Up campaign to sort of build out deliverables for brands that, with garment workers at the helm of those deliverables to kind of determine, how they're treated in conditions like you mentioned, as well as, getting fair pay for them. So we have already secured over 14,000 signatures there as well, and we'll keep working on building that up. So we'll plug that a little bit later, but just as a heads up now, it's payupfashion.com where you can sign that petition and keep it going.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yes, everyone go check that out right now.
Yes.
100%. And just to speak on, like, obviously we have a lot of remake wins because we're an awesome community and we really just are trying to build just people who are conscious, you know, conscious consumers.
Mhm.
And speaking of consumerism and ways that are new things that are coming into life that are just really awesome. The rise in thrift and vintage shopping is so awesome to see. If you guys didn't see it yet, Etsy just bought Depop for
Mhm.
$1.6 billion.
Mhm.
That's a lot of cash. Um, and if that's not just like, if you can't tell, like, obviously that's a lot of money. So Depop is doing so well. It's like in the UK, I think it's 1 out of 3 people are on Depop, and it's growing in the US every day. Which is awesome. If you don't know what Depop is, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's like you have your own closet and you can sell your own clothes, but also buy from other people's closets. And it's really cool because it's very generationally oriented. So it's like
Mhm.
sort of like Instagram, like you can make your own page and things like that. Um, which is just an awesome new thing that people are really excited about. There's also more platforms like this, like ThredUp, where you can send your clothing and you can buy thrift from there online. Poshmark as well is a great app. The Real Real, if you're looking for something more high end. Rebag, which is like
Mhm.
designer handbags that are refurbished, or not refurbished, but also like made better. If there's any holes or leathers being used too much, they can fix it. And then there's another one called Heroin. Another thing that's awesome is the rise of like swapping and renting. I know the remake community is all about swapping and having different swap events, which we love to do and get together to do. And I really urge people to try to do that with your friends. It's just a great way to keep your clothes in circulation, and it's becoming so much more like acceptable and exciting. There's a site called Swap Society, which is based in LA. That's a great site to check out. There's one launching in the UK called Loanhood, which has been an awesome platform, kind of in a similar world to Depop, but it's about swapping. So you can like swap different items with different people for a certain amount of time. And that's also similar to a website called Wardrobe that's based in New York, where you can send them like parts of your wardrobe for like months at a time, and they rent it out to people. So you're like making an income on the side, which is pretty cool. But also you can get designer pieces for like 4 days at a time for like low as like $30 or something crazy, which is awesome
Yeah.
and good for those people who are like going to events or like trying to wear something new but not wanting to purchase, you know.
Mhm.
And then there's the rentals, you know, like Newly and Rent the Runway. Again, really great if you're looking to like buy or wear something for a short period of time, if you have an event, or if you're just going out and you want something to spice up your capsule collection you already own. And then the last thing is we have also seen circularity and recycling become more mainstream in the fashion industry, which I think was kind of the last leg. And it's really starting to pick up, which Tessa mentioned earlier, like we want brands to be thinking about this in the beginning stages of designing. So like, what's the end life of a piece going to be like, you know? So a really cool company to check out is The Big Favorite. They're based in Philadelphia. They're awesome. What they have is like basics and underwear. And what you can do is there's a barcode label on their clothing. You scan it and they send you, I think it's a shipping label, and you can send it back to them. And they recycle it into new pieces, which is just like unheard of. And it just completely closes their loop, which is amazing. Um, and something so new. There's a group called Eon Group who also does something similar. They're not a fashion group themselves, but they work with brands to do something similar with barcoding on clothing so that you can really understand what you're wearing, like where it was from, all the components and things like that. Again, unheard of and a very exciting like innovation. There's brands like And Again, who are based in LA, who have created this like zero waste textile that's like all of their fabric scraps from production, like in designing, and then they make it into this like basically their own fabric, and then they make it into other clothes. So it's like completely closing the loop of like what's doable. So there's a lot of these innovations that are coming through the woodwork that are just like, wow, like this is what we need designers to be thinking of so that the end life isn't landfill, you know.
Mhm.
There's also some great, if you're looking to design at all, there's some great companies called like Fab Scrap and Queen of Raw who do like dead stock fabric, which means if you don't know what dead stock fabric is, it's like a large company buys too much fabric and they're not using the rest of it. Companies like Fab Scrap or Queen of Raw will take it over from them and resell it so that other people, like other small designers, can use that yardage to make their own collections, which is pretty awesome because it keeps it in circulation. So I mean, this is what I'm so stoked about is like these innovations because this is what we need. This is like we need the change that will then push consumers to understand like, hey, like we can do better and you can do better. You can make conscious decisions and understand what goes into your clothes that you wear and you wear on your body every day.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And back to really quickly the Depop thing, guys, please go check out Depop. It's literally the best thing ever. Thrifting is like the holy grail of all shopping ever. It's so fun.
It
It's a whole
is.
it's a whole activity, and I don't understand how you can't have a good time doing it. You're literally going through and you're finding unique pieces and you're getting them at a good price and you're reusing clothing. So not only are you going to be cute and you can be on trend through thrifting, but you're also
Yeah.
being sustainable and getting it for cheap. So like definitely if you don't want to
If
go
you
to a
see
thrift
something
store.
you like love too, like a trend that you're seeing everywhere, you could like literally type that in on Depop and people show up with
Exactly.
like, oh, and then they're not wearing it anymore, so then you can wear it. It's awesome.
Exactly. And so yeah, so definitely I always say that Depop is basically just like a thrifting app. If you don't want to go to the thrift store and sift through 1,000 clothes, go on Depop, search in the term that you're looking for, and you can find so many great things. I love someone it's like everyone will always ask me, they're like, "Oh, like where do you get a good pair of jeans?" I'm like, there's two places I shop. That would be the thrift store and Depop.
Hmm.
So check those out. Other than that, I really don't know what
Yeah.
to tell you. But
Yeah. I'll
I
even go to
also
like a regular store and find my size and then go on Depop and be like, blah, blah, blah in this size, like exactly. So then I don't have
exactly.
to buy it new. Like,
Literally,
you can avoid
exactly.
buying new. It's the best thing to do.
Yeah, and I also love just you were mentioning about these innovations. I love that I definitely do, I see a lot of brands that will if they'll have like a kind of like a warranty on like a piece of clothing and they're like okay like if there's a tear in it or something like you can bring it
Yeah.
back and we'll sew it or like we will offer tailoring and stuff like that and that
Mhm.
will make the like end life a little like prolonged to the garment because then you can go back and get it repaired. So I love that I'm seeing brands doing that too.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. The Patagonias of the world, they really set the stage for that. I mean, I think LL Bean did that too, where you could like send it back and they fix it and give you a discount to buy another one, or if
Yeah.
you fix it and then you use it again is the best thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Yes. I love seeing those innovations as well. So we touched a little bit on, SB62. How, how can the fashion industry, can they do this on their own or do you think that they really need government regulation and pressure from consumers um to like have this change happen a little faster or just have this change happen at all?
Yeah. I would say it definitely will happen faster if there are government regulations in place, if consumers are asking for this. So, we see that pressure from consumers on their local governments in particular for legislation that's centering garment workers' rights, centering, environmental policy, as well as just consumer pressure on the brands directly can really push that change forward faster. So consumers have to be asking these questions and need to be advocates for garment workers. We know that individual action can lead to collective action, which can then make that impact. So,
Mhm.
yes, the short answer is yes, consumers kind of need to be involved in order to make it happen faster.
Definitely. Yeah. And so consumers need to be involved. What can the everyday consumer do? I feel like so many people when they think about like being sustainable or having sustainable wardrobe, they think it's harder. It's can be more expensive depending on like where you're shopping or unless you're going to the thrift store, then it can be cheaper. But what can everyday consumers do to become more sustainable or to help out with this?
Yeah, I mean, you can sign a petition that calls for fair wages and eco-friendly practices, which is a huge thing. Like we're just talking about regulations, like get on board with that, help us with that. Host and attend events that help shed light on the injustices that happening in the fashion industry, kind of educating, spreading the word. Make a promise to think more often about the women making your clothes, because that will help you in turn make better shopping habits, and establishing those like new shopping habits. So wearing what you already own, essentially shopping your own closet, and make a commitment to shop less and buy better. One thing that we talk about a lot is the 30 wear rule at Remake. So the next time you want to buy something, consider this: will you wear it at least 30 times?
Mhm.
If not, it's best to just walk away. And if it costs less than your favorite cup of coffee, just kind of understand that the women who are making it were most likely exploited in the process, which is a hard thing to swallow, but understanding that will help you walk away faster.
Yeah,
And like we talked about, mending is such an amazing skill, that you can learn and do. So I definitely have learned a lot about mending on YouTube. There's so many different tutorials. If you don't have a sewing machine, like definitely look at YouTube for like hand sewing stuff, taking it to a tailor as well, like in terms of mending, like with a hole. Super easy to do, and supporting your local tailor is also awesome. Um, Participating in swaps like we do at Remake, or just swapping with friends and maybe hosting your own like little swap event, like a little swap party. vaccinated COVID people. You could trade in. So like going to a thrift store and kind of like getting the money back from them and getting something else in return. Borrowing from a friend, borrowing from a family member, from a coworker, any of that kind of stuff. And then if you have to buy used, like we're talking about Depop, going to a thrift store yourself, all that kind of stuff. So there's some ways, and there's just a lot to do. Like we have so many ways.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested in really going all the way and really committing to this movement, we'd encourage you to become a Remake ambassador and join us. And our ambassador program was kind of started as a way to build community. So we, through this process, everyone can kind of grow connections. You can just among fellow sustainable fashion advocates, and at least for me, I know having this community kind of helps to sustain my involvement in this movement, and always gives me hope, and lifts my spirits, and just kind of reminds me of all the good in the world and among, our peers, like both of you, that are really just trying to do whatever we can with the tools that we have to make a positive impact in this industry and in this world.
Definitely. Well, there's so many things that that the listeners can do to become sustainable. I feel like thrifting, and that's the easiest one. Like, just go to the thrift store,
Yeah.
But it's funny because the other day I was looking for YouTube content, and I was like, oh, like let me just like make outfits out of my closet. And
Yes,
it
love
was
that.
so helpful. And I might be weird, I don't know, but I'm like a fashion major in college, and all I think about is outfits and fashion
Makes
and everything.
Yeah, we were both also, so
Okay.
we get
Yes.
it.
So it might be weird, but I love just like planning outfits and like going through my closet and making outfits. I find it so entertaining. And I was bored one day, and I was like, okay, so like let's just make this YouTube video, and let me go through my closet and let me take things that I don't think I've worn since I bought it, or I don't think I've worn since I got it 10 years ago and I wore it once, and it's just been in my closet. So like let me take that garment and let me try to make an outfit out of it. And it was so fun just to do, but then it also just completely just like repurposed my closet again. So I, like you said, I shopped
Totally.
my own closet. So if
Yeah.
you guys are ever bored and you love just making outfits like I do, that is such a great way of just like shopping your own closet. Just go through and pick something out and be like, oh, I haven't worn that since the first time I bought it. Like, let me just make a really quick outfit and let me fall in love with this garment again. And then you can wear it 1,000 different ways.
Totally. I'm
It's
loving
a lot of
also if
fun.
you've seen the TikToks of people who are like,
Yes.
I'm gonna wear one shirt for the whole week, but this is how I've styled it for the whole week. Like that's
Yes.
so cool.
Yes.
Like you said, like falling in love with your pieces again, really trying to reinvent them, like tying something up, wearing it open, like wearing it backwards. Like there's so many different ways. Like I've done that. I have.
I
Shameless.
love I
Wearing it
looks
backwards.
that I'm like, is that backwards? Ooh,
I don't
I
know.
love
Oh, it's
that.
cute that
The
way
tag's
too.
like in the middle. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, definitely I suggest doing that because it literally just repurposed my closet again, and I really enjoyed doing it. So it's like a good time and a more sustainable way of going through your closet. But
Totally.
let's talk about sweatshops. When people think of sweatshops, they kind of think of countries like Bangladesh, China, but I don't think most people know that we actually have sweatshops in the United States. Most clothes that are made in the USA are manufactured in LA or in New York. Can you tell me about garment workers' working conditions? Are LA and New York's GW conditions much different from those in other countries?
So LA factories are very small and dirty compared to the huge factories you find in many parts of Asia. Asia sometimes has better regulations in some ways. What essentially stands out about LA's working conditions is they are flagrant violations of the law. So in Bangladesh, worker wages are low, but this is devastatingly legal, which also needs reform, of course. But in LA, factories are getting away with paying a third of the state mandated minimum wage, which is just fully illegal. So there's a lot going into that, and we're going to touch on in a minute or so about SB 62
Yes.
and how like people can get involved with that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, let's just go into that right now. So I know there's a law, SB 62, that California lawmakers are considering to protect garment workers. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like we said, we're going to jump right into SB 62
Yes.
or Garment Workers Protection Act. It's a Senate bill, which obviously we've been talking about this whole podcast because it's so important. It's co-authored by Senator Maria Elena Durazo and sponsored by the Garment Workers Center in LA. It's a California bill that would improve working conditions in America's largest garment industry by ensuring that brands share in the responsibility of for garment workers' pay under the law, which they aren't currently. SB 62 would strengthen protections for garment workers in three essential ways. By one, eliminating the use of the piece rate system of pay, instead ensuring that legal hourly wage become the floor, not the ceiling, of wages paid to garment workers. The bill allows for incentive-based bonuses tied to productivity on top of a legal wage. Number two is establishing multilateral accountability among brands and manufacturers for wage violations. And that will, number three, strengthening the authority of the Labor Commissioner's Investigation Bureau to investigate and cite violations for supply chain. So there's a lot going into it, but it's super important that people in the US are aware of what's going on in LA and around the country. And kind of looking into what's going on and how they can get involved so that this passes.
Yeah. And just as a little anecdote too with the piece rate, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, piece rate is basically when a garment worker is paid for either a step of a garment construction, so maybe a seam on the side of your t-shirt, or paid for just completing one garment and constructing that one garment. So with piece rate, there can be a lot of room for exploitation there, a lot of loopholes. And that's what SB 62, is working to kind of counteract and correct, so that they can just earn this base level of a living wage, or at least a minimum wage in LA. And then beyond that, then add in this piece rate, sort of bonus of productivity being tied to earning more. So as we said, piece rate, not a great system, a lot of room for exploitation. People can make as little as, $5 an hour sometimes. So it's a
Wow.
big problem.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So what do we think the likelihood of SB 62 getting passed is?
Yeah, so as we touched on a little earlier, so the Garment Worker Protection Act just passed the California Senate, so that's very encouraging. And it got a vote of 29 yeses and 9 noes, so we love that 3/4 majority. And this is both a positive sign, and it practically just puts us one step closer to ending this abusive piece rate and expanding liability for wage theft, as Emily touched on. So again, like just putting those checks and balances in place to make sure this is monitored. So next, the policy moves on to the California Senate Assembly. So we'll be keeping a close eye, and we'll keep kind of amplifying this work.
Amazing.
Yeah, you can follow along too by following Remake at Remake. What is it? Remake Our World.
World, yeah.
Yeah, at Remake Our World on Instagram, and then Remake.world is our website, and they also will have updates throughout what's going on, so you can be informed.
Yeah.
Amazing. So is New York pursuing similar legislation around these manufacturing practices?
So the difference between LA and New York is there is a difference. So most of the garment factories left in NYC are sample factories who do cut and sew for smaller designers and high-end brands. So it's a very different industry than LA. If you don't know what sample making is, it's if designers are testing out garments, they'll do a sample run, and then once the sampling is approved, they'll do bulk production. So it's very different from industry in LA, of course, which is heavily oriented towards fast fashion and cheaper products. That said, we'd love to see SB 62 inspire national legislation or other needed labor legislation. So it's definitely a conversation we're excited to hear about and talk about, and we'll see what happens once this is passed, because this will be a great milestone.
Yeah.
And do we need federal legislation to prevent this from happening in other states as well?
So I would say the short answer is no, we don't need it. It's just at least not the only way to make this happen. At least in the recent Remake community call that we had, this came up, where a lot of times it really just starts with local action first in order to kind of bubble up to the federal level. Or national level. So, it makes it possible, at least if we start with LA, specifically within California, to kind of replicate that bill once it's passed, if those, certain elements are in place and a state is able to enact it. And then it can kind of amplify throughout other states and maybe go to the federal level. So it doesn't need to start at the federal level. If it did, obviously it would be a much quicker way if it passed there first. It'd be a quicker way to, kind of tackle issues across states. But a lot of times it really just starts with the local and kind of works its way up.
Got it. Is there anything else that you guys would like to mention to me or to the listeners?
Yeah. So like you said prior, become a Remake ambassador. Awesome. Like awesome way to get involved, as well as like signing the Pay Up Fashion petition. So it's payupfashion.com. You could also get informed through, like you said, our Instagram at Remake.world. Sign up for Remake's incredible newsletters right on Remake.world. This makes this information really accessible and makes taking action like super easy. We also have an awesome campaign going on right now. It's the No New Clothes campaign. It's going from June 1st to September 1st. It's not too late to sign up. Definitely join. Never too late. So what the No New Clothes campaign is that it's making a pledge to really buy no new clothes during this time. If you have to buy thrift, but it's really a dedication to not buying anything and trying to like reshop your closet and wear what you already have. Also great things to do, join the conversation, ask brands to pay up, DM them on Instagram, whole nine. Ask brands who made my clothes, get involved, and really start the conversation to get other people involved as well. Educating others as well is the best way to do it. Buying responsibly, learn a new skill, the mending, the upcycling. Like I said, YouTube is a huge resource. And yeah, we are just so excited that this podcast is live, and we thank you so much, Lexi. This is going to be an amazing conversation starter for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions. If you guys want to get involved, we mentioned you can become an ambassador for Remake. I am an ambassador for Remake, and I personally love it. You can also follow them at Remake.world, and as they mentioned, their website, Remake.world. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about all of these issues. I hope that everyone, really they hear about this and then they're getting more interested in this, sustainable fashion and ethical fashion rather than just shopping to shop. You guys can follow me on my social medias, my Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube are at Lexi Silverstein. That's Lexy, silver like the color, STEIN. And remember to make the ordinary extraordinary.